like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
All right, guys, welcome to my list of Scream. Now, Scream 6 is coming out, which is kind of amazing how big of a gap there was between like Scream 3 and Scream 4 and then Scream 4 and Scream 5, and now we're getting 6 right after it. It's kind of crazy, but with the success of 5, I definitely understand why. So with Scream, I really wanted to kind of just rank them because this is one of the most consistently good horror franchises. And today I have my nice little ranking here. So number 1 is Screamtastic, which means it's a fantastic movie. Very good means it's very good, has very minimal problems for me. A decent scary movie is, a decent fun like horror slasher. A weaker entry means that there's a lot more flaws than I would have liked, but still watchable. And then a waste of time is exactly that, a waste of time. So at the point of this video, I have not watched Scream 6. So when we get to Scream 6, my rating for that is actually where I'm hoping it will be based on what I thought of 1 to 5. So let's see how that ends up. And then if you guys want my opinion on 6, I will definitely make a follow-up video, kind of just putting it in there where I do end up putting it. Or I could just make a comment if you don't want to see my beautiful face again. Anyway, let's get to Scream. So Scream is a really interesting movie. As a 90s kid, it was one of my first like horror franchises I got to grow up with in terms of seeing in the movie theaters, but I didn't see Scream 1 in movie theaters. I was too young, I think, or nobody wanted to take me, whatever the reason was, and I popped into the VHS player, which is interesting because some of you probably don't even know what a VHS is. And upon watching it, as someone who grew up with all the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween movies, it was really cool to watch this because it was kind of a callback to some of them and making fun of them and the tropes and playing on those tropes. So it was definitely an interesting movie. It was the Deadpool effect where it's talking about the movies while being in a horror movie. I like that type of stuff. And yeah, this movie was just really great. Love the meta commentary. I would say that some of the kills in this movie aren't my favorite. I think a lot of them are just okay. Saying that, though, one thing I do like about Scream that I think a lot of other franchises didn't really have, and now they do, is the chase scenes. Like, there's a lot of chase scenes in here that you're on the edge of your seat because they almost get stabbed or they almost get slashed. I really like that in Scream, the entire franchise, but one really kind of started it. And just the opening scene to Scream is probably, I'd say, top 10, at least top 10, maybe even top 5 openings for horror movies. It's fantastic, it's creepy, it's scary, and it's brutal at the end of the opening. If you don't know the opening, you probably should be watching Scream before you watch my list because there will be spoilers. But yeah, so where would I put Scream? I'm going to have to put it in, Screamtastic. I think it's not only started a franchise, but it also started a genre for horror, and that is something special. And yeah, I absolutely love Scream. I think it's a great movie. So Scream 2 is that sequel that tried to go bigger, better, and kind of failed at a lot of it. See, what they tried to do is they brought back a lot of the cast. So you got Sidney, Gale, and all those characters, definitely Dewey, all make an appearance again, which keeps it relevant or interesting from the first movie. You even bring back like Randy, who's the guy who's talking about horror movies and how we shouldn't get caught. But I think there was a lot of missteps. I think what happened with this movie is the opening, again, is great. It's not quite as good as the original, but I enjoyed the opening. I thought it was kind of disturbing because that's how the phenomenon was back then with these horror movies, and still is, but not to that extent. And then the movie stays interesting. A copycat killer is always interesting because a copycat killer knows what went wrong and wants to do it better. So I thought that was cool. And everything was working well. But then the second that, and again, spoilers, Randy dies in this movie, it was just kind of a nosedive for me in terms of like being interested. You killed one of the more interesting characters, at least for me. But doing so, you also have Sidney and Dewey and Gale all finishing their story arcs here. And the reveal of the killer, I like how they kind of played it as who could be, is he really the killer, things like that. But if I'm being honest, I'd say the last third of this movie didn't really work for me in terms of being that interesting. The kills were pretty good, and I did enjoy the first half, or up until Randy died, pretty much, a standard fun slasher type movie. So that's where it's actually going to go. It's a decent scary movie. Not great, not bad, but I had a decent time with it. So Scream 3 is one of those movies I really had no desire to rewatch after I finished. I think for a lot of people, Scream 3 is the weaker of the movies, or probably the weakest. Though I know some people like my wife actually enjoy it more than some of the other movies in this franchise. But for me, it's not something that I can really get heavily invested into. I thought the idea of being in a house and getting hunted by the killer was unique enough that I was interested to see where it would go, but the payoff was weak. And the opening, cool idea to kind of close the book on a certain character because of what happens. But again, it kind of diminished my interest when you killed that certain character that way, or what it led to, or it's just the killer in here wasn't my favorite. Do you like Scream 3? I think it's a good enough movie, but it is the least memorable. It's the least rewatchable for me. I've only seen this movie 3 times, once in the theater, once when I showed my wife, even though she saw it already, we rewatched it. And then I saw it again a couple of years ago just to kind of refresh my memory once Scream 5 was announced. And I was like, yeah, I really have no desire to watch this again. So I think it's one of the weaker entries. I don't think it's a total waste of time. I don't think it's like one of those terrible movies, but I do think it's very forgettable and not that enjoyable after a couple of watches. So it's going to go in a weaker entry because I think it's still solid enough where I can't say this is a bad movie. I've seen millions of horror, well, not millions, but thousands maybe, or hundreds of bad horror movies way worse than this that I would put below it. So it's a weaker entry. I would give it like a maybe a 5 out of 10 watching it, and that to me is going in the weaker category. So Scream 4 was a movie I wanted to see in theaters, but it came out around the time I was starting to get like ready to move from New York to Florida, and I wasn't really in the mindset to go see movies that much. And so I remember watching this movie with my friend, and we put it into a Blu-ray player, very different than a VHS. If you don't know what a Blu-ray player is, come on. And I remember not loving this movie when we watched it. I thought it just kind of felt like hollow in a sense, which is funny because then I rewatched it again with my wife and I enjoyed it. And then I watched it again before Scream 5. And again, I started liking it a little bit more. Every time I watch this movie, there's moments that start creeping up on me that add to the movie. I think when they introduce the new characters like Kirby and Jill, they kind of put more into the movie. They're a younger cast. It's fresh. It's exciting again. But also having Sydney and Gail and Dewey as kind of the mentors of this movie. But it is very much kind of a dual movie. It actually focuses on the new characters and the old, and it makes for an interesting and fun time. I also think it has one of the best kills in this movie. It's just kind of a sad one in a way because of how, so when you're in like an alleyway and how these things can happen. It almost felt too realistic in a sense where people are walking by. It kind of gives me the chills. But overall, I like this movie. I like the kills. The bedroom scene kind of just sticks with me as one of the best kills in the entire franchise. And I know this movie isn't for everyone, and I do feel like it does miss some of the spirit of the older Scream movies, but at the very same time, every time I watched it, it went from decent to good to even great or very good for me in the end. I almost said very great like an idiot. But yeah, I'm going to put Scream 4 in that very good category. All right, and so we have Scream 5, and this is the newest one before Scream 6 comes out tomorrow at the time of filming, or tonight, I guess you could say. And yeah, Scream 5 is a really interesting movie. I saw it when we went to visit a family and we spent the night out. We wanted to try to go to the movies and eat a nice dinner. So I'm like, let's go see Scream 5. It's the opening weekend. My wife's like, hell yeah, Scream, baby. She loves horror. And we're like, yeah, let's do it. We went, we sat down, and I didn't have high expectations. I wanted to just be good. If it kept the quality of good, at least it wouldn't be worse than 3, or I wanted better than 3, but I wasn't really that interested. And I came walking away from this just loving it. And what I really like about Scream 5, I think will really work with the new characters. Again, they kind of introduce even newer characters into the franchise, and characters like Sam and Tara as sisters really makes interesting. But then you also have the killers in this movie, and I'm going to go into spoilers. So if you haven't seen Scream 5, you really should. Characters like Amber and her crazy ass partner. Sorry, I had to look up the partner name because I didn't want to sound stupid, but Richie. So these two basically represent extreme fandom, and I love it because some people watch this movie and complain, they're so bitchy and whiny and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, that's what like mega fandom is, in my opinion. There's so many franchises I absolutely love and enjoy, and I see so many little whiny bitches in the fandom just complain about everything or want to stay so true to the franchise, don't want anything to change, want it to stay exactly how it was, that they make threats, that they want people to die, that they send death threats to authors, that they write emails the size of fucking novels just to get their point across. Like, it's ridiculous. And that's what these killers are, except they go to the extreme and actually try to murder people to recreate Scream in a way to make it interesting. And I love that. I love this idea of the fandom just going berserk to the point where they want to kill people. Now, some people are like, that's not a good enough reason, but I have been on the internet a long time, unfortunately, making a lot of content and getting that type of stuff where people actually threaten me for things like giving Tekken a lower score one year, and people actually wanted to come to my job and shoot me and stab me. So that's how scary fandom can be. And I think it's really interesting that they were able to play that out here. Not only that, but I think this is the most vicious of the kills in the movie. There's two deaths in here that I think are extremely brutal and just kind of disturbing and disgusting, but that adds to it for me. I think that if you take it as is, if you don't expect like a crazy, interesting new style of killing, then you're gonna really enjoy the kills in here because they're kind of straight to the point stabbing, but the way they get stabbed and how brutal it can be just added it for me. And I thought the pacing was really well done. It felt nice. It went at a good speed. People died at a good pace. It didn't feel like everybody just died right away or took too long to get to kills. It just worked for me. This is definitely a nice soft reboot, I guess you can call it. It's not really soft reboot, but soft revival for the franchise. That's why they just called it Scream instead of Scream 5. But as we can see, it was very successful. It made a lot of money, and that's why we have Scream 6. So for me, this is the best since the original, and almost on par with the original, in my honest opinion, in terms of pure enjoyment. Now, I think Scream, the original, did so much more for the franchise, obviously, but Scream 5, in terms of pure enjoyment and characters and kills and all that, I really enjoyed this. It's my favorite Ghostface killers since the original, and it's going to go in Scream-tastic as, yeah, fantastic. Now, Scream 6 has some really cool ideas. As someone who grew up in New York, the idea of a Ghostface killer running around shooting people is fucking horrifying and very realistic in some ways. Also, the fact that we're getting the returning cast plus the returning cast of 4 with Kirby, and then we also have Sam and Tara returning. You're really adding those characters plus Gale, who, if I'm making a prediction, again, I haven't seen any spoilers. I've been really good. I've only seen one trailer of this movie. I'm very excited for it, so I'm just making speculation, but from the trailer, I feel like Gale might be the opening scene of, her dying, but I could be wrong. But I just feel like that would set the tone for the rest of the movie to be like vicious, dark, and fucked up, and I'm okay with that. But even if that's not the opening, I think Gale's gonna bite it here. This feels like a very much darker tone movie than the last few, even though I thought 5 was pretty dark tone. And yeah, I'm very excited. Where do I think it's gonna land? I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to enjoy as much as 5. I think 5, the reason I enjoyed so much, was a nice surprise for me. And I don't know if it'll live up to 6. Sorry, the first one. That would be hard. But I think it has a very good chance of taking my number 3 spot. Right now, I have Scream 4 there as my number 3 movie for the franchise. But I have a feeling 6 is going to end up there. So for now, I'm going to put it in very good as my expectations. I want it to be very good. I don't think it'll quite be as good as 5 or 1 for me personally, but I hope if we can get into very good, that's great. If it surpasses my expectations, it's my favorite Scream movie, more than even the first, I will be sure to let you know. But this is my list. Scream, as you can see, is a very solid franchise. I think similar to Predator, it doesn't really have any bad movies. Well, Predator has Alien vs. Predator, but besides that, the main Predator movies, kind of similar to Scream. I think there's a weaker entry, and then the rest are decent to good to great to fantastic, and that's awesome. This is one of the most consistently well crafted horror franchise, and probably one of the best just slasher franchises in general. So yeah, this is my list. But what about you guys? The nice thing about Scream, there's not a million of them. There's 5 and now soon to be 6. We don't count the TV show. Not because it sucked, I just didn't watch it. But what did you guys think? Do you love this franchise? Is it one of your favorite? Is it a franchise that's just, that's okay? Or is it a franchise you just despise because of the meta feel of it? Let me know below, and then list your list if you've seen them all or if you only seen 1 or 2. Tell me your favorite or tell me your worst. Everybody, I hope you enjoy this, and let's go see Scream 6 and hope for the best. Everybody, have a great night. Wow, that was corny. Why don't I do something cool like, have a great night? That doesn't sound like Ghostface at all. Shut the fuck up.